Hello and a very warm welcome to the Analyst dated 5th September 2025, brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi, wherein we'll be covering the 7 set of current affairs issues which are featured in today's newspaper. And the handout of this very discussion is available in the description below for your future reference. Beginning with the analysis section, as recently the GST Council has approved the second generation of GST reforms. So in this backdrop, we'll try and understand the changes introduced and their implications for the different sectors. Moving on to the second topic, as recently the rules and orders issued by the government under the new Foreigners Act has come into force. So in this backdrop, we'll try and understand that what was the need of this particular act and what all changes have been introduced when it comes to this new legislation. Moving on to the simplified section, herein we'll be covering the 5 set of current affairs issues in the most simple manner possible, and we'll also be doing the relevant value addition from Plink perspective. So stay tuned. Now, beginning with the first topic, which is dealing with second generation GST reforms. This particular topic you can associate with GS paper 3, especially the topic issues related to mobilization of resources, growth and development. What has happened recently? In this recent meeting, GST Council has approved GST 2.0 reforms, and these reforms would be coming into effect from 22nd of September this year. Now, before we understand that what all changes have actually been introduced through this GST 2.0, let's just understand that why we introduced this GST through 101st Constitutional Amendment Act in 2017. How our indirect taxation system actually looked like before pre-GST or before GST. So before GST, if you look at the indirect taxation system in India, it was highly fragmented and compliance heavy. Why am I saying this? These are the words which I have taken from PIB itself. The reason being, the central government was imposing different kind of taxes, state government was imposing different kind of taxes. So ultimately, it is the corporate houses which have to comply with both kind of taxes, and that increase the compliance cost. Take for example, when you talk about the state government, they were imposing value added tax, sales tax, and when you talk about the central government, they were imposing excise duty. So, because of this fragmented indirect taxation system, the compliance cost increased manifold when you talk about the corporate houses, and that negatively impacted the ease of doing business as well. Then there was lack of uniformity. Why am I saying this? Now, as we discussed right now, the VAT was imposed by the state governments. Now, it was up to the discretion of the state government that what would be the level of VAT in that respective state, and due to this reason, what used to happen, despite the value addition being done when it comes to a TV, let's suppose, merely because of difference in the VAT rate in different states, the same TV would be sold at different prices in different states. So don't you think so? It went against the interest of the consumers in that particular state where the VAT level was quite high. And that is the reason we say that pre-GST, the indirect taxation system was totally against the idea of one nation, one tax. Then we had a very weak input tax credit mechanism in place. Under GST, we have an effective input tax credit mechanism in place. Let's just understand what is this input tax credit mechanism. Now let's suppose Mahesh is owning a company, and this company procured 3 raw materials or 3 inputs. And when his company procured 3 raw materials, on each of them, the company paid taxes. When it procured A, it gave a tax of 150 rupees. On B, it gave a tax of 50 rupees. On C, it gave a tax of 100 rupees. Now, the final tax on the output that has been produced by the Mahesh company turns out to be 450. Now, is that so? The Mahesh company would have to give this entire amount of 450? The answer is no. The Mahesh company would be getting the input tax credit on the tax that his company has already paid when they procured the 3 inputs. Okay, so we would be adding the tax which this company have already paid on the input. That turns out to be 300. So ultimately, this Mahesh company would be paying only 150 rupees additionally. Okay, because these 300 rupees they have already paid. This is what we call it as input tax credit system, which was quite weak in the pre-GST time. Then in pre pre-GST phase, we had double taxation. Central government imposing service tax, state government imposing value-added tax. Ultimately, because of this double taxation system, what happens? The price of the product increases manifold, and this again goes against the consumer interest. Okay, and it also negatively impacts the interest of the business houses ultimately, because if the prices are high, consumers would not be interested in buying that particular product. Okay, so that was the reason we needed GST to realize this idea of one nation, one tax, and ultimately improving the ease of doing business. So what all milestone we have attained because of this GST? So we have put in place a unified tax structure, realizing the idea one nation, one tax. So to realize this idea, we have subsumed a lot of state government taxes and central government taxes. Okay, you can refer to the example of the taxes. And if you go by the PIB, we have subsumed 17 different taxes and 13 cesses into one unified tax. Now you understand that how it is going to have a profound impact when it comes to ease of doing business by reducing the compliance cost. Then it has led to formalization of the economy. The question would be coming into your mind that how GST led to formalization of the economy? The answer to this is input tax credit ecosystem. If you want to get input tax credit, you need to register yourself with the GST network that is there. Okay, and because of the GST, what we are witnessing? Reduction in inflationary pressures. So due to that also, the taxpayer base has increased. And if you go by the PIB, we have witnessed a remarkable increase when it comes to the taxpayer base from roughly 66 lakh in 2017 to 1.50 crore in 2025. And since the GST is addressing the inflationary pressures, that is the reason people are spending more and ultimately leading to record increase in revenue growth also. Okay, it has doubled in last 5 years, as you can see from this data point. And right now I said that when it comes to GST, it reduces the inflationary pressures. For that, you need to understand how. And this brings me to the concept of cascading of taxes that we used to witness before GST. Now to understand this concept, let's just assume 3 players. This is you who wants to buy a new iPhone maybe, but I am assuming very less price of this iPhone. So this is the mobile manufacturer, this is the shop. Okay, so the mobile manufacturer did the value addition of 100 rupees, and for simplification, we are assuming that the tax rate is 10% merely. Okay, this is for simplification. So now value addition is 100 rupees, tax is 10% of 100 rupee. So shopkeeper would be paying 110 rupees to the manufacturer. Now this shopkeeper is doing value addition of 40 rupees. This turns out to be 150. Now things are going to change here at this level. Before GST, what used to happen? I have to pay tax on tax. So I have already paid tax on this 110 amount, but again I'll be paying the tax. So what is the total amount that I have to pay to the shopkeeper? 150 plus 10% of 150. So this turns out to be 150 plus 15, that is 165. This is pre-GST phase. What is going to change after GST? So after GST, what would happen? I would not be paying 10% on this entire 150 amount. 150 plus, what was the value addition? It was 40 rupees only. So 10% of this 40 rupees. This turns out to be 150 plus 4, that is rupees 154. So as you can see, before GST, because of the cascading effect of taxes, the price of the product was quite high. But here, the price of the product is less. Okay, so that's how GST basically addresses the cascading effect of taxes. You don't have to pay the tax on the amount on which you have already paid the taxes. You will only be paying the tax on the value addition being done. Okay. Now, let's understand what is this second generation reforms. So according to the government, the second generation reforms is based on 7 pillars. We have built upon the success of previous GST framework, and now we have reduced the tax slabs. Previously we had 4 slabs, that is 5%, 12%, then we have 18% and 28%. So what we have done now, we have done away with these 2 slabs and we are left with these 2, 5% and 18%, and new 40% of the tax slab has been introduced, which would be imposed on luxury and sin goods. Sin goods, for example, pan masala, tobacco products, etc. Okay, and then the government has stated that we are going to rationalize the rates, and this rationalization of the rates is going to further smoothen the taxation system that is there. Then with the help of technology, the government is trying to simplifying the registration process, especially for the small and low risk businesses. Then we are putting the consumer first. Why I am saying this? Because in majority of the essential goods, the tax bracket is between 0 to 5% only. Okay, so this would reduce the price of the essential commodities, hence reducing the cost of living also when it comes to the Indian society. Then we are empowering the MSMEs and the manufacturer by addressing the inverted duty structure. What is this inverted duty structure? In inverted duty structure, what happens? This is raw material, this is the final product. On final product, the tax slab would be less, it would be 5%. On raw material, it would be higher, 18%. This is what is inverted duty structure, wherein higher taxation is placed on raw materials rather than the tax rate which is there when it comes to the final products. So we are trying to address this when it comes to MSMEs and manufacturers. Then we are putting in place stronger rates, because according to the Honorable Prime Minister, for Viksit Bharat, we need Viksit Rajya as well. Okay. And lastly, we have lowered the taxes. This would give a boost to spending, and this reform was needed, keeping in mind the negative impact which the US tariff is going to have on the Indian economy. Okay. Now, let's just understand that what would be the impact of the second generation reforms on different sectors. First sector is food and household sector. Right now we have discussed that how when it comes to the essential commodities, the tax bracket is 0 to 5%. Now when the tax goes down, what happened to the prices? Prices would also go down. When the prices goes down, according to law of demand, what would happen? The consumption would increase. This would give a boost to consumption expenditure, and when the consumption would be high, expenditure would be high, ultimately this would result in increased revenue growth for the government and ultimately giving a boost to the economy. Then if you talk about automobile sector, here also we have reduced the tax rate. So this again is going to give a boost to the automobile sector, increasing the sales before the festive season. Then when you talk about agriculture sector, herein the GST has been reduced when it comes to tractors from 12% to 5%. So this is going to give a boost to mechanization when it comes to agriculture. Then the drip irrigation system and sprinklers, on them the GST rate has been reduced from 12% to 5%. This is going to enable us to realize the idea of sustainable agriculture, enhancing the water use efficiency when it comes to Indian agriculture. Then when you talk about the services also, here also we have reduced the rates. When you talk about hotel accommodation below 7,500, therein the rate has been reduced from 12% to 5%. So this is going to give a boost to the services sector also. Okay. Then when you talk about education and healthcare, herein the government has made the education more affordable. In majority of the commodities which are used in the education sector, like your pencils, sharpeners, notebooks, etc., therein the tax bracket has been reduced to 0%. And similarly, when it comes to healthcare, herein the government is guided by the idea of affordable healthcare, and that is what we can see. The GST rate on majority of the drugs, life-saving drugs, has been reduced from 12% to 5%. So reduction in rates when it comes to the education sector and when it comes to the health sector would go a long way in enhancing the idea of social security and welfare state, and this would also enable us to reduce the cost of living when it comes to India. Okay, and it would make healthcare and education more affordable for the poor section of the Indian society as well. Then to give a boost to the insurance sector, the government has reduced the GST rate to 0% when it comes to the individual health insurance as well as individual life insurance. This would enable us to realize the idea of insurance for all by 2047. Okay, so ultimately because of these reforms, what would be the impact on the overall economy? First, it is going to give a boost to the consumption expenditure, hence leading to higher revenue growth and giving a boost to the economy, which is being negatively impacted in the backdrop of increased tariff imposed by the Trump administration on Indian goods. Then it would also improve the tax base that is there, okay, because of the reduced taxation system. This would enhance the registration process also, as we have understood here that one of the pillar is that we are going to simplify the registration for the small and low risk businesses. So higher registration means what? Increase tax base also. Okay, so these would be the intended impact, positive impacts. What all issues are still there when it comes to the second generation reform? So first concern has been raised by the textile sector that okay, when it comes to the simple textile material which is there, you have reduced the tax slab from 12% to 5%. But when it comes to the garments which are priced above 2,500, therein the tax rate is 18%. So this is going to negatively impact the textile sector, and according to textile sector, this is going to impact the middle income, group which is there when it comes to the Indian economy, because they are the one who consume these kind of garment products. Then aviation sector has also raised concern that higher GST on non-economy seats is going to make premium travel more and more costly. Ultimately, it might make some routes unviable because people would not prefer buying non-economy seats, okay, or business class seats that are there. Then the edible oil or the vegetable oil sector has pointed out that when it comes to the edible oil market, therein the issue of inverted duty structure is still pertinent. We have understood that what is inverted duty structure, wherein the tax rate is higher on raw material as compared to the finished products. Then this is going to lead to certain fiscal federalism related issues, because according to the states, they have raised the apprehension that this rationalization of the GST tax structure would reduce the revenue, and ultimately this would be affecting the revenue being shared by the central government with the state governments. So in this backdrop, various opposition political parties are making a demand that all states should be compensated for a period of 5 years, considering 2024-25 as the base year, because they are having this concern that this second generation GST reforms would have a negative impact on the revenue growth, okay, when it comes to the central government. Now, that's all that we have to learn from this particular topic. UPSC has previously asked a question on this particular theme GST, so do practice this particular question, and based on our today's discussion also, I have framed a practice question for you people, so do practice this particular question. With this, let's move on to the next topic. Now, beginning with the second topic, which is dealing with the new Foreigners Act. This particular topic you can associate with GS Paper 3, Internal Security. Now, what has happened recently? On 1st of September, the rules and the orders that were notified by the government under the Immigration and Foreigners Act of 2025, they have come into effect. Now, let's just understand that what was the regulatory framework in place before we came up with this new Foreigners Act. So, we had 4 laws which used to regulate the staying, entry and exit of foreign nationals. These were Passport Entry into India Act, Registration of Foreigners Act, Foreigners Act 1946 and Immigration Act of 2000. Now, you must be clear by this now that we have a very fragmented regulatory framework in place. So, in order to do away with this, piecemeal approach of fragmented regulatory framework, it was needed to consolidate all these acts and to completely overhaul India's system when it comes to regulating the entry, stay and exit of foreign nationals. Let's just further understand that what were the other needs, why we needed this particular act in place. First reason we have already discussed, that when you have fragmented regulatory framework, it creates a lot of confusion, okay. Some act would be saying something else, another law would be saying something else. So it led to a lot of confusion and ambiguity, and that create challenges when it comes to enforcement of the rules and orders issued by the government under these different acts. Then another point that you need to understand is that majority of these acts that we had in place, they were enforced during the colonial time. So the government wanted to do away with the colonial continuities also. That is another reason. Then there were issues with the exemptions. Now, the government used to notify different rules and orders under different set of acts. Now, the officer who is going to evaluate that whether this document is valid or not, and whether the exemption is applicable to Tibetan refugee, Sri Lankan Tamil refugee, what kind of exemptions are applicable in these class of refugees, it became very difficult for that officer to find out, okay, that which exemption is applicable to which kind of, refugees. Then there were reporting issues also. Previously, everything was done in a manual basis, and you know that if any authority has to do something in manual basis, there would be delay, okay, in getting the information. And because of this data gap, this used to severely impact the enforcement of the rules and the orders also. Then there was ambiguity in enforcement. There was lack of clarity that who has the power to decide that whether this document is a valid document or not to get the entry into India, whether it is the local authority or the central government. Okay, so there was ambiguity when it comes to the powers also, that which level of authority has what kind of powers. Then there was, different rules in different places for entry into protected and restricted areas. Okay, the rules and the orders were not uniform. So that was another challenge. Now let's just understand the different and the important provisions when it comes to the Immigration and Foreigners Act of 2025. Firstly, you need to possess a valid document if you are a foreigner and you want to enter into India. That means you need to have a valid passport or a travel document. Unless explicitly exempted by the Act or a special order of the central government. Okay, so exemption in this case would be provided by central government only. So you see, we are clearly specifying that which level of government would be having what kind of powers, okay, to avoid confusion when it comes to enforcement. Then the entry and exit is allowed only via notified post, that is all major airports, seaports, land border post, rail post. Okay, this is basically to address the issue of illegal immigration in India. Then it is the immigration officer at that notified immigration post which would be having the final say that whether to allow entry to a foreign national or not, okay, on the grounds of national security. Again, we are clearly specifying that which level of authority have what kind of powers, you see. Then we have defined registration and control mechanism. So a foreign national must register with the designated registration officer, and we have created a network of foreigners regional registration officers with respect to different regions, okay, and it is the district superintendent of police and the deputy commissioner of police which have the power when it comes to immigration and foreigners regulation. Then we have placed an obligation when it comes to accommodation providers like the hostels, hotel, paying guest homes, etc., that they need to collect the particulars of foreigners, basically thumb impression or signature, and they have to fill a form electronically and they have to give these details to the concerned authorities within 24 hours of both arrival as well as departure of every foreigner. So you see, from manual we are moving to electronic mode to address the data gap that we previously had. Okay. And it would also be including the details of overseas citizen of India card holders. Overseas citizen of India, basically they are actually the citizen of another country, but they are people of Indian origin. Then when it comes to educational and medical institution, they also need to notify the registration officer about the foreigners admitted and treated. And when it comes to hospitals, they must electronically report every birth and death of a foreigner within 7 days, again addressing the data gaps that we have. Then authority to shut down resort and clubs which is frequently visited by the foreigners, and this authority would be with the civil authority. Okay, again we are clearly specifying which level of government would be having what powers on the grounds of security, public order concerns, etc. And when the authorities can do so, when they can issue the order to shut down the clubs and resort, when the authorities have this opinion that the foreigner is a criminal or is linked to unlawful association or otherwise undesirable. And the owners of clubs and resorts, they cannot shift their operations elsewhere without the permission of the concerned authorities. Then when it comes to getting the entry in protected and restricted areas, for this you need to get a special permit. And this permit, the foreigners could get it through a designated online portal or mobile app. Okay, so you can see how with the use of technology we are simplifying the things, and we are putting in place a uniform mechanism when it comes to getting the permits for entry into protected and restricted areas. Earlier we had a lot of ambiguity. Okay, and this form would be similar form. Okay, and the form would be clearly specified and procedure would be specified on that online portal and mobile apps. So we are trying to bring uniformity in this respect. Now, what all categories of foreign nationals are exempted when it comes to the provisions that we discuss? Members of Indian military entering in and exiting from the country, and even their family members who are traveling on government transport. Okay, so we don't need to register their details. Citizens of Nepal and Bhutan who are entering into India via designated land or air borders. Okay, but if they enter through these country, China, Macau, Hong Kong or Pakistan, then this exemption would not be applicable to them. They would be allowed to enter into India from these locations also only when they possess valid passport for air entry to other destination. Okay, they are not going to stay in India for a longer period of time. Then Tibetan refugees, they would be provided with special entry permits who have entered between 1959 and 30th May 2003 or later under designated post, but only if they have registered themselves with the concerned authorities and they hold a registration certificate. So no penal action would be taken against these Tibetan refugees provided they have registered themselves with the concerned authorities and they hold a registration certificate. Then when it comes to minority community refugees, basically I am referring to Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, Jain, Parsis and Christians who have basically fled from their country of origin because they were facing persecution based on religious lines, okay, and who have entered into India from these three countries, Afghanistan, Bangladesh and Pakistan, and they have entered into India on or before 31st December 2024. Under the Citizenship Amendment Act of 2019, this cutoff date was 31st December 2014. Now the cutoff date has been increased, okay, by the Ministry of Home Affairs, and the Ministry of Home Affairs has clearly outlined that this exemption would be provided to the minority community refugees which are entering from these three countries, provided they seek a long-term visa and they will have to acquire Indian citizenship through naturalization if they have entered after the Citizenship Amendment Act cutoff date. Okay, when it comes to naturalization, this is a mechanism through which a foreign national can get Indian citizenship. These are not people of Indian origin, and if you want to get citizenship through naturalization, before you have submitted the form with the concerned authority to get Indian citizenship, you need to be ordinarily residing in India for a continuous period of 12 months, and before this 12 months, in the span of 14 years, you should be ordinarily residing in India for 11 years. And when it comes to Citizenship Amendment Act, this period was reduced to 5 years for these religious minorities. Then registered Sri Lankan Tamil nationals who sheltered in India up to 9th January 2015, holders of diplomatic and official passports who have entered into India from different countries, okay, and the residents from nation who are eligible for visa on arrival. So we studied first major provision was you need to have a valid document to enter into India, but this exemption would be provided to people who belong to certain nations wherein Indian nationals are also getting visa on arrival. So they can enter into India without valid document, but once they enter, they would be provided with visa when they arrive in India. Then foreign military personnels who are visiting India for humanitarian exercises. Now, what all changes we have introduced and how it is going to benefit us? So, as we discussed that how we have moved from manual to digital mode, this would enable us to address the data gaps that we were previously witnessing. Then the government has adopted a graded framework when it comes to penalizing, okay, the people who are not following the provisions of the Act. For example, if you are overstaying in India as compared to the date which is mentioned on your travel document or visa, non-registration, violation of visa terms, failure to notify the authorities, in this case, the fine would range from 10,000 to 5 lakh. And different rates are applicable to Tibetans, Mongolian, Buddhist monks. In that case, the fine is merely 50 rupees. Then, in case of bona fide mistake is when you have not done a mistake intentionally, your intentions were not wrong. Okay, in that case, you would be provided with a proper appeal mechanism also, so that you can, present your case in front of the concerned authorities. Then we are witnessing centralization and delegation. Now, under this Act, the central government is the one which would be delegating the function to states and union territories. And it would also have the power to modify, cancel, or issue special orders or general direction at any time. You need to understand what is the difference between delegation and decentralization. Delegation is if I am giving a task to my subordinate for maybe a temporary period of time, but the ultimate authority lies with me only. But in decentralization, it is a broader term. Okay, you are making structural changes and ultimately you are giving the authority to the lower level of government, and in decentralization, the lower level of government has greater autonomy to function. Then, no discretionary exemption has been given at the local level. So, all the exemptions when it comes to entry, visa documentation, entry to protected and restricted area permits, all would be decided based on the orders which are issued by the central government. Okay, so we are trying to address the ambiguity which was previously the case. And what would be the positive impact of these acts? Addressing the data gap, okay, and we have clearly outlined that which level of authority, which officer would be having what kind of powers, okay. So when you clearly assign the roles, it becomes easier for enforcement of that particular act. Then we have made various offences compoundable. That means out of court settlement is allowed, okay, you just have to pay a fine. This is going to reduce the burden on the courts when it comes to India and would make the resolution more efficient. And then we have clearly listed the exemptions for different categories of refugee, minority refugees, etc. This would address the ambiguity that we had previously. So, local variations would not be there. What is going to be the negative impact of this particular act? Firstly, it would create a compliance burden when it comes to the hostels which are there, hotels which are there, because they have to maintain a record every time a foreign national is coming to them. It could negatively impact the tourism sector also, okay, because the foreigners would think that we have to, give and maintain a record with the registration officer, so that can negatively impact the tourism sector also. And lastly, we are witnessing more centralization as we have reduced the scope of discretion, okay, to the designated local level officer when it comes to deciding the exemptions for different category of refugees. So everything when it is centralized, again it becomes very problematic to decide the things on case to case basis. The local level officers always should have a kind of discretion to decide the things on case to case basis. Yes, there should be a general guideline that okay, these exemptions should be there, but some sort of discretion should be given to the local level officers also. Okay, so these are the things that we need to discuss with respect to this particular act. I have framed a practice question for you people, so do practice this and let us know your answers in the comment section. With this, let's move on to the simplified section. Now, beginning with the simplified section, recently the Ministry of Home Affairs, Manipur government as well as Kuki Zo insurgent group, they have signed a peace pact. This particular topic you can associate with GS paper 3, issues related to internal security. Now, this particular pact is being referred to be as suspension of operation pact. Why suspension of operation pact? Because based on this particular pact, we would be relocating the camps being run by this particular insurgent group. And this development came right before the scheduled Honorable Prime Minister visit to the state of Manipur, which is to be going to happen on 13th of September, and this would be the first visit by the Honorable Prime Minister since the violence erupted in the state of Manipur way back in 2023. Now, based on this particular pact, security forces would be identifying and doing the verification of the cadres of this particular insurgent group, and they would also be identifying the foreign nationals which would be deported, because one of the concern of violence, as was pointed out by the Methi group, is that there was a huge influx of foreigners from Myanmar. Okay, so that is why the pact also mentions about deporting the foreigners, okay, who have entered into the state of Manipur from Myanmar. The pact clearly outlines that we would ensure territorial integrity of Manipur, and whatever solutions we would be coming up to solve this violence which we are witnessing in the state of Manipur since 2023, that would be done keeping in mind what the Constitution of India says. Okay. And one major development is that the Kuki Zoo Council, which is basically a group of civil society organization, they have agreed to open this National Highway 2, which connects Impahal with Dimarpur, which is there in Nagaland. So this would enable free movement of people as well as goods. Okay. So in this pact, the government has clearly stressed this thing, and it has outlined that the solution to this violent situation that we are witnessing in the state of Manipur is through dialogue only. Okay. What all further aspects were there in this particular pact? So it has laid down the mechanism to monitor the activities of the cadres, including the requirement that they need to obtain an Aadhaar card. And this pact would be valid for a year. And the cadres of this insurgent group, they would be given a stipend, but only if they have Aadhaar with them. Okay, and they need to have their bank accounts linked with the Aadhaar. And this photo identity card would be provided to them by the Manipur police. During their identification, they need to be present when the inspection is being done by the concerned authorities. Only when they would be registered by the concerned authority, only then they will be getting the stipend. Then when it comes to these two insurgent organizations, that is Kuki National Organization and United People's Front, as we talked about, that there would be relocation of the camps. That is what the pact is saying, that these two insurgent groups need to reduce the number of camps from 14 to 6 camps each. And the camps should not be located close to populated area, national highways, an area where we are witnessing conflict, and the area which is vulnerable to conflict. Okay, and it should not be located near the interstate boundaries, and it should be located at a reasonable distance from Myanmar border as well. Then the physical verification of the cadres would be done by a joint monitoring group, which would be headed by the Principal Secretary to Home of Manipur government. And a complete list of these cadres would be prepared by the concerned authority, and it would be given to the government, which would contain the name, date of birth and other details along with the latest photographs. Okay, this is being done so that we can clearly identify that who among them is a foreign national and we can deport them to Myanmar. Okay. Then this agreement shall be followed by a tripartite dialogue with the insurgent groups, with the Manipur government as well as the central government. Okay, and we would be having a negotiated political settlement. Okay, so whatever would be the solution, that would be coming out of the dialogue process only. Okay, now solution would be enforced on the insurgent groups. Okay, no enforcement of any solution which is not agreed to by the insurgent group would be enforced on them. And whatever settlement would be done, that would be done keeping in mind what the Constitution of India is saying, and all the things would be done in a time bound manner. The pact bars group from having association with any other armed group within the country or outside, and from recruiting new cadres. Okay, so that we do not fuel the ethnic conflict which is going on. And they are not supposed to carry out offensive operation against our security forces. And the same obligation has been placed upon the security forces, that is Army, Assam Rifles, the Central Armed Police Forces, etc., that they are not supposed to launch the operation against this group as long as they abide by this particular pact, okay, or this agreement. Now let's just make note of certain facts with regard to Kuki tribe. So they comprise multiple tribes, and they basically live in regions in the state of Manipur, Mizoram, Assam, and some of the Kukis are also situated in Myanmar as well as Bangladesh. Then they are closely related to the tribe which is there in the Myanmar, that is Chin Kuki tribe, and Mizo people which are there in Mizoram. And they are together collectively called as Zo people. And when it comes to the term Kuki, this term was not created or chosen by the tribe itself. This is a colonial construct. Okay, the colonial leaders or the British administration basically gave them this particular term, and they also used to, classify old Kukis and new Kukis basically for administrative convenience. Then they have very important cultural institution, that is Swam, wherein the boys get the knowledge from the elders. And when it comes to Lom, it is where the youth club fosters social bonding, community service and practical skills. Then when you talk about the traditional economy, they basically practice the jhum or the shifting cultivation, and that is the reason they were able to expand their settlement. And because of this jhum cultivation, they came into conflict with the other tribes also. Okay, Naga, who used to practice territorial agriculture, and Metis, who lived in the cultivated valley areas. Because of this jhum cultivation, they were expanding their settlement, and that is why they came into conflict with the Nagas as well as Metis. That's all that we need to know with regard to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next one. Now, the National Institution Ranking Framework for 2025 has been released recently. This particular topic you can associate with GS Paper 2, issues related to education in India. And this year, it is the IIT Madras which has topped. Second is Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. But when you talk about this particular ranking framework, it has been criticized by our Union Education Minister. Why? Because of one of the parameter which this ranking used, that is peer perception parameter, which carries a weightage of 10%. And according to the state governments, this parameter goes against the state-run educational institution, and we have also seen a regional bias. Why? Because the educational institutions which are situated in the metropolitan cities, they are the one who score higher in this particular criteria. What is this peer perception criteria all about? In this, the National Institutional Ranking Framework, they do a survey with the academics, with the scholars and with the employers, that whom they will prefer, graduates from which higher educational institution they will prefer to be employed, okay, in their company or as PhD scholars. And based on that peer review, the score is given to a particular educational institution. Okay. What are the other parameters which are being considered by this particular framework? That is teaching, learning, resources, research and professional practice, graduation outcome and research and inclusivity. We will be understanding them each one by one, just wait. Then the Education Minister, Union Education Minister has pointed out that this ranking framework needs to evolve and it should include other parameters as well. Okay, entrepreneurs created by an institution, involving more data-driven approaches, which institution is, adopting data-driven approaches, and this should include more category of institutions in future. Okay, these are the, recommendation given by our Union Education Minister. Now, which all educational institute has topped in which category? You can see here. Overall, it is IIT Madras. Engineering, it is IIT Madras again. Management, IIM Ahmedabad. Universities, it is IISc Bangalore. And when you talk about the colleges, it is Hindu College. Now, let's just note down certain prelim pointers with regard to this particular ranking framework. So, this framework was introduced by the Ministry of Education way back in 2015, and its sole objective is to do a transparent assessment of the educational institutions which are there in India based on certain parameters. And based on this assessment, students should be able to make an informed decision about their education, that which institution they should prefer for higher education. Okay, and this would encourage the institution to improve on these parameters. And when you talk about the frequency, it is updated on an annual basis. So, every year this ranking is released. Now, when you talk about the parameter, so one parameter is teaching, learning and resources, wherein we look into the student strength, faculty-student ratio, faculty with PhD, financial resources and utilization, and online education mode. When you talk about research and professional practice, herein we see the number of publications being, published by that particular educational institution, then citations, how many, research papers which have been released by that educational institution are being cited else, in other research or other papers, patents, research projects, etc. Graduation outcomes, herein we are looking into the placement levels, okay, whosoever is graduating from that educational institution, what all salaries they are getting, how many students are becoming a PhD student, okay, PhD scholar. Then outreach and inclusivity, herein we see that the students, whether they are coming from different regions when it comes to India, how many women students as well as women employees are there, whether we have students from economically and socially challenged category and physically challenged category. Then peer perception index, we have already discussed that herein they do a survey, they ask the academics and the employers that graduates from which higher educational institution they'll prefer to employ. Okay, that's all that we need to know with regard to this particular news. Let's move on to the next one. Now recently, Yamuna River has hit the season's peak. So this particular topic you can associate with the geography section of a prelim syllabus. So according to Central Water Commission, whatever data they have, the water level of Yamuna River at the old railway bridge has peaked this particular season, as you can see from this very pictures also. Now in this backdrop, we have to note down certain prelim pointers with regard to this particular river because it is timely in news. It is one of the longest and the westernmost tributary of river Ganga. It originates from Yamunotri Glacier, which is on the western slopes of Bandarpunj range of Uttarakhand. Then it flows through India only and it covers 3 states, that is Uttarakhand, Uttar Pradesh and Haryana. When it passes through Delhi, it basically provides the water for Agra Canal. And at Prayagraj or at Allahabad, whatever you say, it joins the Ganga River. And when you go by the Hindu tradition, wherever 2 major rivers are meeting, the confluence of 2 rivers, it is considered to be a sacred place, okay, according to the Hindu tradition, and that is the reason we witness organization of Kumbh Mela at Prayagraj, because Yamuna and river meets here. Then Chambal River is Yamuna's biggest tributary, which joins this river from the right side. And then you talk about the other tributaries, right bank tributaries, that is Sindh, Betwa, Ken. When you talk about the rivers joining the Yamuna River from the left, that is Hindan, Rind, Sengar and Varuna. Now, as this article also mentions about the Central Water Commission, let's make note of certain prelim pointers with regard to this body also. So, it functions as an attached office of Ministry of Jal Shakti under the Department of Water Resources, River Development and Ganga Rejuvenation. It has its headquarters in New Delhi, and what are its sole function? Basically to coordinate with the state governments, do the consultation with the state government. For what purpose? For schemes which are dealing with the control, conservation and utilization of water resources. And it also undertakes the investigation, construction and execution of any such scheme which is dealing with water regulation or utilization of water resources. When you talk about its organizational structure, it is headed by a chairman which has a status of ex officio secretary to Government of India, and it has 3 wings, that is design and research wing, river water management wing and water planning and projects wing. That's all that we need to know with regard to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next one. Now, recently the Singapore has acknowledged India's plan to patrol the Strait of Malacca. This particular topic you can associate with places in news section when it comes to the prelim syllabus. Why India is interested in patrolling the Strait of Malacca? Because it lies next to the Andaman Seas. And currently this area is being patrolled by other countries like Malaysia, Indonesia and Thailand. So in future we would be strengthening our relation with these other countries as well. So recently the Singapore counterpart was on a 3-day visit to India, and when it comes to this particular visit, we have signed various agreements. One of the agreement relates to export of green energy from India to Singapore through dedicated ports. Then the 2 countries have decided that we would be deepening the defense technology cooperation, as well as we would be collaborating when it comes to enhancing the maritime security as well. Now, you need to make note of certain prelim pointers with regard to this Strait of Malacca. Now, first thing that you need to understand is what is a strait. So, strait is a very narrow water body which connects 2 larger water bodies, maybe 2 oceans, maybe 2 seas. So when you talk about the Strait of Malacca, it connects Andaman Sea in the Indian Ocean, as you can see here, with the South China Sea, that is in the Pacific Ocean. Then it stretches about an area of 800 km and it is the longest strait in the world. It runs between Indonesian island of Sumatra to the west and to West Malaysia and the extreme northern Thailand to the east, and has an area of about 25,000 square miles. Okay, as you can see, Malaysia here, Singapore here. Then through this corridor, approximately 60% of the world's maritime trade transits. Okay, so this is the main source of oil supply for the two main Asian consumer, that is your China as well as Japan. Now previously, as UPSC has asked a mains question on the important strait and how they contribute to the international trade. So I have just put in place this additional information for you people with respect to the important straits which are there and which two water bodies, larger water bodies they are connecting. So just go through this particular table that I have put in place. Okay, as you can see here, UPSC has asked a question in the mains examination way back in 2022. That's all that we need to know with regard to this particular topic. Let's move on to the last topic of today's analyst. Now recently, the government has created a panel headed by Rajiv Gauba to basically review the Bureau of Indian Standard Certification rules. This particular topic you can associate with GS paper 2 statutory bodies. Now, as we have discussed, this particular panel is going to review the quality control orders which are basically administered by Bureau of Indian Standards. What are these quality control orders? They are government notification that make it mandatory for the manufacturer to secure BIS certification before they sell or import any specified product. Okay. So in this respect, the industries have raised concerns with respect to certification requirement, that how it increases their compliance cost. Okay. So this particular committee is going to review what all hurdles the industry is facing when it comes to getting the approvals, examining what all challenges this, because of this rules the companies have to face when it comes to standards and the processes that they have to put in place. So this committee is considering proposals such as digital mechanism for getting the quality control orders, self-certification models, or we can go with third-party inspection to ease the compliance burden and hence improve the ease of doing business. Now in this respect, let's just make note of certain prelim pointers with regard to Bureau of Indian Standards. So it is the National Standards Body of India which is established under the BIS Act of 2016 and it works under the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution. It has its headquarters in New Delhi, and what is the objective? Basically to put in place harmonious development of the activities of standardization and quality assurance of goods and articles. Basically to put in place standards, okay, with respect to different goods. So that is the reason it operates various schemes like product certification, ISI mark, hallmark of gold and silver jewelry, you must have seen this. Okay, eco-mark scheme for basically whether the products are environment friendly or not. Okay, this is being done to address the issue of greenwashing. Do let me know in the comment section that what do you mean by greenwashing, because previously UPSC has asked a question on this thing. And then this is the body which represents India in International Organization for Standardization and the International Electrotechnical Commission, which basically put in place that what all processes, standard processes and the quality which the electronic products has to meet. Okay, that's all that we need to know in today's analyst. Quiz would be coming right up next, so don't forget to practice the quiz based on the discussion that we had. Till then, keep smiling, keep learning. Have a great day all of you.